A day to remember for the rest of your lives.
There's a great promise for all of you.
The Pro Football Hall of Fame and Extreme Networks present the Heart of a Hall of Famer program. With nearly 100 Hall of Famers participating, we have reached 48 states around this country, sharing the message that football is more than a game and can teach Americans how to huddle up during a time when we need to be united.
It's time for America to take a real deep dive. Not at no one else, but at yourself individually. If you want to change America, don't brush your teeth with your head down. Look at who you are and be the example. Be the example.
An opportunity to meet and learn from one of the greatest football players of all time. But more than that, the chance to see that their Hall of Fame life wasn't given to them. Single-parent homes, drug-infested neighborhoods, and poverty.
I grew up in a neighborhood that was considered one of the worst in America, and the household I grew up in was one of the worst in that neighborhood. By the time I was 20 years old, I knew at least 30 friends or family members who had lost their lives. Football became like a second parent to me. It taught me the things that my father wasn't there to teach me, and that my mother, as a struggling, single-parent woman, just didn't know to teach me.
But they learn how to live a life of character before pursuing their football careers. Today, you will learn you can do the same that they once did. Making good decisions can lead to a prosperous life both on and off the field. Your game for life has already begun. It's your decision whether or not you want to be a successful student, son, daughter, brother, or sister.
Every one of you can have a Hall of Fame life, whether or not you play football. You can be as great as you want to be. The Hall of Fame is all about integrity, character, and excellence. You have the opportunity to represent yourself that way. You determine your character.
Welcome to a once-in-a-lifetime program, The Heart of a Hall of Famer.
Finally, a thanks to my hometown, Stowe, Ohio. Just a few short miles away, my junior year in high school, when the announcement was made that the Hall of Fame was going to be here and linked with the National Football League the way it's been, was a great thing. We Ohioans had great pride in the fact that it was here. This part of the country, this Midwest area of the country, is where great football is produced. And the young men that play the game come from here to make it great, in my opinion. We've always had a lot of pride about that, so it's particularly pleasant for me to come back after feeling that pride and finally make it. Thank you very much.
All right, welcome back to the Pro Football Hall of Fame, the most inspiring place on earth. My name is Jake Wright. I'm the Youth and Education Manager here at the Pro Football Hall of Fame in Canton, Ohio, and I am super excited today to host another great Heart of a Hall of Famer program powered by Extreme Networks. Today, featuring, as you saw in that video, Ohio's own, Northeast Ohio's own, Mr. Larry Csonka. And we'll get to him here in a second, but a little bit about us here at the Pro Football Hall of Fame. If you've tuned in to any program before, you know what I'm about to talk about. That's our mission statement. The mission here at the Pro Football Hall of Fame is to honor the heroes of the game, to preserve its history, to promote its values, and to celebrate excellence everywhere. And those values we promote are those of commitment, integrity, courage, respect, and excellence, all of which not only make our Hall of Famers great, not only do they make Mr. Larry Csonka a Hall of Fame halfback, fullback for his entire career, they made him a great person. And you'll see how these values keep coming up in all the different things we talk about today because they're that important. They make good athletes great and great athletes excellent, but most importantly, they make good people great and great people excellent. You're going to learn a lot of things today, all of our students tuning in, but if there's anything you take away from today, it's just how important that those values are. Now, before we turn things over, just a few quick thank yous. First of all, I'd like to thank our great partners at Extreme Networks for everything they do for us here at the Pro Football Hall of Fame, and truly everything they do for schools across the great country and even NFL organizations. This program could not take place today without their great support. So all of those folks from Extreme Networks, thank you so much. Secondly, I'd like to thank our teachers and administrators, for allowing us to come into their classroom. We all know how crazy this school year has been. So we are just excited that you allowed us to be a small part of your learning experience this school year. Lastly, I got to thank our students. Without you guys here today, this program doesn't take place. I'm excited to see what questions you guys have today. I know Mr. Csonka is excited as well to hear those questions from all of our great students watching from all over the country today. So all of our interactive students, make sure you're all prepared when we come to your classroom to ask your questions. If you're a view-only participant, make sure to submit some questions in the chat function or the Q&A. We'll do our best to make them a part of the program. And lastly, if you're watching us live on YouTube, throw a question in the comment section. Let us know who you are, what school you're from. And again, we'll try our best to make it a part of the program. So that's enough of me talking. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome Gold Jacket class of 1987 in Shriney, Mr. Larry Csonka. Larry, welcome to the program today.
Thank you, Jake.
Thank you. Thank you. So first thing, we just to start, if you got any opening remarks you'd like to share with everybody tuning in today?
Well, you pretty much covered everything. I was going to tell the kids that I was fortunate enough to grow up in a kind of a wide open country space out around Stowe, Ohio, about 30 miles from where the hall's at. And in my junior year in high school, they announced, the newspaper announced that the Hall of Fame was going to break ground down in Canton, the exact location you're at right now. So along with the two or three of my other buddies, we flicked school and went down to watch and get in on the action and watch the great pros from the 30s and 40s that were showing up for the groundbreaking ceremony. I had heard that Bronco Nagurski was going to be there, and he was a hero of mine. I wrote many book reports about him. Never had the opportunity to see him play ball, but heard a lot about him, but I wanted to see him in person. So I went down to the groundbreaking, and it was a invitation only. And being industrious young kids that we were, we managed to sneak in. We got thrown out once. So my first visit to the Hall of Fame, I was thrown out. But the second time I got back in and managed to get up within 10 feet of Bronco Nagurski, who was down at the end of the line when they did the groundbreaking ceremony. And he looked at me and smiled and winked, and it made my day. That's when I decided I wanted to come back to the Hall of Fame. And it took 50 years or so, but it happened.
Yep, you got that, Jackie. Now, I will say, little caveat out there. We're not condoning skipping school. Everybody that's in school right now, we want you to stay there. But a really cool story, we interviewed Dan Deerdorf in this program earlier this school year. And he kind of had the same story about what it was like to be here at the groundbreaking. So very cool that we had two Hall of Famers that were here as high school kids watching the groundbreaking. And ended up with one of those gold jackets. I don't know if there's another story like that out there to any Hall of Fame across the country. So really, really cool story.
Jake, I'll tell you what, there's several others besides myself that are from that area. And I think several of us were playing high school football at that time and did come down there. I think there's like 5. I'd have to write the list out and check it with the Hall, but I'm sure there were some other Hall of Famers there as well.
Yep. So you got those folks from Stark County alone. You got Len Dawson, Paul Brown, Alan Page, who the story is he actually helped build the Hall of Fame and then ended up here as well. So really cool story. And we love the connections to Canton and Northeast Ohio. And that's another great one. To start everything out today, we mentioned those values: commitment, integrity, courage, respect, and excellence. And they're all super important. And they're just 5 of all the cool values that you can learn from the game of football or all sports. But is there one of those 5 that stand out to you as more important, or does everything kind of have equal importance?
I think the very first one that you mentioned stands out the most to me: commitment. That's just making up your mind that you're going to do it, deciding you're going to do it, and then having the self-discipline to maintain that commitment. And, it's not going to be a rose walk. It's, there's going to be times when it's going to be much easier to quit and walk away from it. But that's the time that all of us go in the corner and think about it to ourselves and decide whether we've got the guts, the integrity to go on with it.
I think that's very important. And, we say that we're using football. We're unapologetically football here at the Hall of Fame, as we should be. But that thing like commitment, you can learn in anything else that you do, whether you play football or play sports or not. commitment is something that you can learn from what you like to do and then apply, to your everyday life or apply to being a student to help you, the rest of your life down the road.
Absolutely.
All right. With that being said, we're going to turn things over to our great students we've got tuned in today. And our first question we're going to take is from Fairport Harbor High School, right here in Ohio. We got Coach Ruff, looks like in their auditorium with some of his players and students. So we're going to throw it out to him. Go ahead whenever you're ready. State your name and ask your question.
Hi, I'm Will Fazekas from Fairport Harbor, and I was just wondering, what was it like to know Don Shula, and what was it like to play under him?
Coach Shula came to us my third year in the pros. We were the losingest football team in the NFL in 1969. And right after that season, they fired the head coach, a fellow named George Wilson, and they hired this guy named Don Shula from his position at Baltimore. And he came down to us, and it was like a day and night change experience. This guy was the epitome of what a football coach should be. He was organized. He had commitment, integrity, courage, respect, excellence. He not only had those things, but here's the kicker, guys and gals. He not only had those things, but he demanded those things of his players. In other words, you could be the most fabulous wide receiver that ever came down the pike, but if you weren't ready to commit to his way of doing things and commit to winning, commit to all the sacrifices that have to be made during the week before the game's played, then you couldn't play for him. And it was just a matter of time before that was discovered and you moved on to another team. So he was a complete reversal of my first 2 years in the pros. Everything turned totally around, and you had to make a decision whether you were going to accept that and follow him and follow those policies, those 5 policies that I just alluded to, or get out of town. And that was the way it was. And at first, it sounds easy when you know that success, when you look back on it, it's easy to say, well, that was a good judgment because it's easy to see the success that was obtained because of Don Shula. But at the time, you couldn't see that. You didn't know the future. All you knew was this guy's making us run around twice a day for 2 hours in pads and 90-degree heat, and he's trying to make camels out of us. And we thought he was going to kill us. In the meantime, he was developing a sense of team unity. We gathered around it. Rather than start to divide and fall apart, it made us come more together. So the bottom line was, even before we faced another foe, we got over the big foe, which is the willingness to make yourself part of the team and put the sacrifice, commit to the sacrifice that has to be taken and given in order to obtain greatness. And that's what he demanded, and that's what we lived up to. It was quite a thrill to meet him and quite a thrill to be coached by him.
And you mentioned right there, just talking about, we all know how important coaches are or mentors in anything. But, just through that answer there, I think you hit every value at least once we talked about. So it just goes to show that, Don Shula, one of the greatest coaches of all time, obviously that has the recognition here at the Hall of Fame. But, you learned probably just as much from the man, Don Shula, that you did from the coach to help you grow, in your life as well.
Absolutely, Jake. I'll tell you that word integrity, that's a word that we throw around very easily, but I've seen Shula in situations where it would have been very easy to take the easy way out, the more convenient way out, perhaps push the rules a little bit. He would have nothing to do with that. Nothing to do with that. His motto was, if we can't beat them fair and square, then we shouldn't beat them. And now you can't. How do you argue with that?
Yeah, that's tough to argue with for sure. We're going to go to our next class. This is going to go to Mr. Cooper's class at Westfield High School. So I'm going to go ahead and ask you guys to unmute your microphones. And whenever you're ready, have a student go ahead and ask their question.
All right. Mr. Csonka, this is Scott Cooper. I'm from near Syracuse.
Oh, yeah.
So I've been a Syracuse Orange football fan forever.
All right.
And my wife is a huge Patriots fan.
That's too bad.
And so my question is this: I know every year, you guys in your 72 team get together to celebrate when the last team to win, or actually the last team to lose a game in the league. Looking back on that New England team, how would you compare that team with your team that went undefeated?
Well, to be quite honest with you, the difference in that team of the New England Patriots that lost on the last one or two plays of the Super Bowl, and our team that went undefeated in 72 is so minute. It probably a fraction of an inch in difference. But the fact of the matter is that little tiny bit of difference is in fact the galaxy as far as difference, because you either do it or you don't. Now you either win and you run the whole scheme and win the championship game, or you don't. And sometimes football games very often come down to one play or 1 millisecond within one play. And that game that you're alluding to for New England, if Tyree hangs on to that ball, it doesn't hang on to that ball on the side of his head in those closing seconds of that game. As he went to the ground, there was a hand in between his. He was holding the helmet against his head, and they ruled it as possession, and it counted, and they went in to score and won the game. The coach of that game for the Giants was a fellow named Tom Coughlin that I went to school with at Syracuse. And I often reminisce with him about that, because we were the same year at Syracuse. He was a halfback in the same backfield with myself and Floyd Little. And he was the head coach of the Giants the day they won that game. So to talk about the difference in the two teams that you asked, the difference man to man, overall team to team, minute. But the difference in winning is a galaxy. You either do it or you don't. They came close, but no cigar.
That's a great thing about sports is, you can have all these great competitions and how close those teams were, but one escape sack, one miraculous catch, and a touchdown a couple plays later cements the legacy between the two teams. And it's sure. Crazy. And that's just the glory of football, is that you never know what's going to happen.
That's that unforeseeable factor that you're alluding to. That's what makes it such a great game.
Yes.
I think it's more competitive than it's ever been, really.
Absolutely. I got a question here on the YouTube stream. This is from Kristen, who is a teacher at J.P. Travella High School in Coral Springs, Florida. She wants to know, how has the game changed from when you played it to now regarding training and game preparation?
Well, all of that hinges on how you're allowed to play the game on the field. So when you talk about training and preparation for a game, you have to play the game the way they dictate, the way they, being the league, dictates that you play the game on the field. That's called the rules. The referees interpret those rules and put them into practice on the field. In order to talk about how the game has changed, how it's gone from one era to another, I would say probably every 10 years or so, the league changes the rules of how the game is played. They want to maintain the integrity. Think about it. Athletes are getting bigger, faster, stronger, smarter. So things have to change. You can't play under the old rules. Now, there's a point where wherever you play, myself being a guy that played in the 70s, I like to think that was the best time to play. But I'm sure that Bronco Nagurski would tell you in a minute that the best time to play was in the 30s. And I'm sure that a fellow like Derrick Henry that runs the ball today for the Titans, he'd tell you the best time to play is right today. And who can argue? But I always see the difference, because as each 10-year period goes by and the rules change a little bit, the game, I think why it's been so successful is because it gets more competitive. They change the rules to protect the players, number one. Number two, to keep the game competitive. And when I say competitive, back in my day, if you had a lead of 3 touchdowns, you could pretty much count on at halftime, you were pretty much going to win that game, just unless a catastrophe happened. But today, because of the rules changes with the wide receivers, where they're not getting knocked down in their routes after they go a couple of yards, you can't touch them anymore. Those things have accented the competitive edge. And now a team that's down by 20 points or more, and I think last year it happened 1 or 2 times, a team that's down by 20 points at halftime can come back and not only tie, but win the game. So that's how it's changed. And that's how it's stayed super competitive, in my opinion. It's through the changes of the rules.
You talk a lot about the game, and it definitely has changed. The style, the way it looks, the way it's played has changed. But you in your career were known, as a tough back. You were the guy that ran downhill, didn't avoid contact, almost welcomed it. I got a quote here, and this is something that Nathan, who you'll hear from in a little bit, found when we were doing our research. In 1996, NFL Films did a production of the NFL's 100 toughest players, and you were ranked as the 10th toughest player of all time at the time of this production. And your offensive line coach, Monty Clark, was asked about your bruising running style, and he responded with this quote: "When Csonka goes on safaris, the lions roll up their windows." So let that sink in a minute, and just to kind of show you how tough of a running back Mr. Csonka was. So with that in mind, and you were flagged in 1970 for unnecessary roughness as a running back, which you hardly ever see. So those two, how would you describe what your playing style was? Was it modeled after anybody? And why did you feel that you had to be that tough downhill running back?
2 things, 2 points that I think I can answer your question intelligently with. The first point is that I wasn't fast enough to get away, so I had to club people back when they started to club on me. And the second part was, and this came actually happened in an exhibition game in 1970. We had acquired a great wide receiver from Cleveland named Paul Warfield, another guy that grew up in Ohio, went to Ohio State, big Ohio State fan. And he, of course, was going to go to the Hall of Fame just on his career in Cleveland, but he was traded to us in Miami. And I had grown up watching, I'd watched Paul when I was in high school, and it was such a thrill to be on the field with him. But I never realized there was a close connection between the power running game, the inside running game, and the wide receivers' take on catching the ball. I knew that, the more accomplished runs we were, that the defensive backs would pull up. But something became very clear to me on a play. I broke loose against Minnesota one time, and they had a defensive back named Krause, Paul Krause. And a good, tough guy from the Midwest. He came up to hit me. And it was obvious that he was going to jump on me from the side and tackle me. So instead of waiting for him to do that, I turned back and hit him head on, which is what most fullbacks do. You don't avoid the contact, you turn into the contact. And the reason being, and the reason it became so clear to me is Paul Warfield came up to me in the huddle right after I turned back in and hit Paul Krause. Now, Paul Krause, in all fairness, weighed 185 or 190 pounds. I weighed 245, and I was full gait going down the field. So when I turned back into him, he took quite a blow, and it dazed him. Well, when I went back to the huddle, Paul Warfield came over to me, our wide receiver, and said, "Thanks, Doc." He said, "I'm going to be able to beat him on this next play because he's still seeing little stars." See, that's when I realized that the game is interlaced. So not always did I turn back into people just to punish them, just to be mean. That wasn't the case. Football is a game of contact. Sometimes a ferocious contact situation for a defensive back can leave him a little bit out of kilter, and that's when your wide receiver is going to execute the deep pattern on him. So that's when it became crystal clear.
That's awesome, and a great way to show, how great teammates can be and how everybody can help everybody out. And as I mentioned at the beginning, we're going to go and kind of showcase the history of this great game. You know, the game of football wouldn't be like it is today without Mr. Csonka's influence on it. You wouldn't see bruising running backs today having the style that they did if it wasn't for a guy like Larry Csonka. So what a better way to celebrate that history than learn a little bit about what we do here at the Pro Football Hall of Fame. So with that being said, I'm going to throw it down to our Ralph Wilson Jr. Research and Preservation Center, where John Kendall is standing by to talk a little bit about what we do here at the Hall of Fame, all the cool stuff we have archived here, and some of those things from Larry's career. So John, you there?
I'm here. Thanks, Jake. And thank you, Larry, for all you do for the game and all you do for the Pro Football Hall of Fame. This looks probably pretty familiar to you. Just a couple of years ago, we were down here doing a program together. So always appreciate everything that you do for the Pro Football Hall of Fame. And I'm happy to talk about your legacy here today with the students and teachers that are joined in. So we are here at the museum, not just a museum, but we have an archive and a collections area. So here at the Ralph Wilson Jr. Pro Football Research and Preservation Center, it is our job to hit on those points that our mission talks about, to honor the heroes of the game, preserve its history, promote its values, and celebrate excellence everywhere. And we do that down here by preserving your legacy, Larry's, and all 25,000 plus individuals who have played one NFL regular season snap through their artifacts and their documents. And then we're able to take these artifacts and documents and showcase the stories that made them so great on the football field, and showcase that those same values that we talked about, they transcend the football field, and they're able to then make you through those values a great teacher, a great business leader, a great student. And so for us, it really is all about taking the values and the lessons you learned on the football field, showcasing them, and hopefully changing lives in the process as we do that. So Larry, just a few things that I've pulled related to your career, which was a phenomenal career. But we have your uniform here from the 1972 season, which was the only undefeated NFL season in history. You were one of two backs on the Dolphins squad, you and Mercury Morris, who ran for over 1,000 yards that season, which is pretty remarkable. We have a huge photo collection, a lot of your images here. This is from when you made your movie debut. And you're getting your hair done there. We've got you with Coach Shula there at your induction ceremony. We've even got a young photo of you here without the iconic mustache. So that's a little bit of the photo collection. We've got a playbook. This is actually Bob Greasy's playbook from the 74 season, but you can see here, outlining the, how you guys huddled up and different things like that. We've got some plays here. We've got, red or green. We've got some stuff about the I formation that you guys would run. And then we got a huge donation from Coach Shula. And this is one of his notebooks, hundreds of notebooks in that collection, which I'm sure he was such a student of the game and made you guys students of the game as well. And, this is just remarkable, the amount of detail. And you really get a sense of what made you guys so good on the football field. It wasn't, just your athletic abilities, but it was all the hours of work that you put into studying the game and doing it the right way that led to ultimate perfection. And so these are just a few things to showcase what we have in the Pro Football Hall of Fame's collection and how we preserve it. One of the questions that I have for you is I talked to Larry Little, who is your guard, an offensive lineman that helped block for you. And Larry talks a lot about how if you and Paul Warfield and Jim Kick, I believe, didn't leave in 75 to join the World Football League, that you guys, the Miami Dolphins, would actually have more Super Bowl wins in the 70s than the Pittsburgh Steelers. And there may not have been a Pittsburgh Steeler dynasty of the 70s. And so I guess my question is two-part. One, what led you to the World Football League? But then more importantly, what was it that you learned maybe from that one season in Memphis?
Well, obviously it's called professional football. So what lured us over to the World Football League was money, quite frankly. And we had an opportunity to double, if not triple, our salaries in a jump with being name figures. And of course, we took advantage of that. It only lasted about a year before the league collapsed. Then we came back into the league. I think Jimmy went out to Denver, and Paul, I think, went back to Cleveland, and I went back to the New York Giants for a couple, 3 years, and then ended my career back with the Dolphins. But that's pretty much why we jumped to the other league. But it was when you say that if we would have stayed in Miami, and you speculate about maybe at the expense of the Steelers and some of their, we'll never know the answer to that. That's strictly I like to think that, but I think the Steelers would take, and quite rightfully so, would take real issue with that. Joe Green would have something to say to you about that. But that's the way it was, and that's the way it happened. But the great thing about that was I did get a chance to return not only to the Miami Dolphins, but to Don Shula and play for him the last year that I played in the league. And that was quite a homecoming. We got into the playoffs. We lost, as a matter of fact, to Pittsburgh, but it was still, I'm glad that I got the opportunity to go back and play one more season for my all-time greatest coach, Don Shula.
Well, that's great, and Larry, I appreciate that. But yeah, was there something that you can recall that maybe you learned from that time in Memphis?
Well, I think it was a good experience. I think playing in another league with other players, changing everything, that's part of what we talk about in some of these. When you talk about integrity and commitment, you make that it doesn't matter whether you play for the same team your whole career or you go to another one. It's up to you to execute that integrity and that commitment at each location. You want to give your best performance no matter what the circumstance, no matter what the team. You might only make a very tiny commitment. This is something I like to talk to when I talk to groups about the fact that we were the only team in 100 years to go undefeated from the first to the last, to go all the way through the championship and win. But you think about the stars, you think about the Bob Greaseys and the Earl Morrells and the Nick Bonacanis, but what you don't think about is any one of those plays that happened during those games, during that year, are any one of our third team guys that hadn't been paying attention. You understand where I'm coming from? A guy that only got on the field for maybe 4 plays a game. If he would have messed up, if he wouldn't have done his job exactly right, then the undefeated season goes out the window. That's what's so unique about an undefeated season, where you go from game 1 all the way to the championship. One time in 100 years, everyone, all 44 players, were just as significant. Any one player was just as significant as any other one player. So it didn't matter whether you were Larry Csonka starting on the offense or Nick Bonacani starting on the defense, or Charlie Babb starting as a backup defensive back and block a punt against Cleveland in the third quarter on one play, turned it around that could have been the one loss that we would have suffered. Every man on that team, every player on that team made a contribution at some point during the course of that season. And every assistant coach as well, and certainly the head coach. That's what makes it so unique. That's why I'm so proud of it. One time, everybody put the team ahead of themselves. They committed to it. They had the integrity to believe in it and dedicated themselves to it. And it worked out.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Larry, and look forward to seeing you in Canton here soon.
All righty.
All right. Thanks, John. Appreciate that live look in. And for all of our viewers out there, if you come and visit the Pro Football Hall of Fame, well, outside of probably you, Mr. Csonka, you can't get in to see all that behind the scenes stuff. So we wanted to provide you a little behind the scenes look and truly talk about what we do here at the Pro Football Hall of Fame. So with that, we're going to dive back into our school questions, and we're going to go to the Belmont County Alternative Program and Mr. Alt's class. So Mr. Alt, whenever you're ready, go ahead and have your student step up to the microphone and have them ask their question.
Hi. What or who motivated you to play?
So Mr. Csonka, who motivated you the most, to play the game of football?
I think going back to when I was about 8 years old, I grew up in the country, right? 30 miles from where you're at right now, but it was a great deal different in 1955 than it is right now. And we were on a farm out in the country, and my older brother went out for football at Stowe High School. And I got to go to a Friday night game. And my brother was 7 years older than I. So, he was 15 or 16 and I was just 7 or 8. And he scored a touchdown. He was a tight end, and he caught a ball and scored a touchdown. And my father was so pleased that he gave me 2 $1 bills and told me, "You take these down to your brother on the bench down there. He's sitting on the bench now after they came off the field." So I went down and I snuck under the wire along the side of the fence. Of course, in 1955, a high school game, it wasn't too much security. It was pretty easy. I walked down and tapped my brother, and when he turned around and took the money from me, I slipped it in his hand. And I remember I liked the presence. I was attracted to football at that time. I just liked the lights, the excitement, the band. I liked all of it. I liked the whole show. It was a little different than what I was experiencing at the farm in Ohio and herding cows. It was a little different. It was kind of a social phenomenon for me to see all those people gathered and so intent in such an element of enthusiasm on both sides, not just on the Stowe High School side, but on the other side of the field as well. I was just mesmerized by it. So I was quite taken back at it. And that was my first real attraction. And then later in the week, my older brother punted a ball to me out in the yard, and I caught it. And I remember how the football smelled. And I thought, I'm attracted to this for some reason. Well, later on, years later, we found out why. It worked out.
Yeah, I would say, having that jacket on, I think it worked out pretty well.
Yes, sir.
We're gonna go next to our next school, right here in Canton. We're gonna go to Patrick Elementary in Mr. Little's class. So whenever you're ready there, go ahead and unmute your microphone and have the student ask their question.
Hello, I'm Sheree from Patrick Elementary School. As a child, what events in your life do you believe helped shape into the man that you are today?
So what events in your life growing up helped shape you into the man you are today?
Well, I think there's a series of events. If I had to go back, it would be very hard to say just one. I think as far as my career was concerned, in my personal life, I think it was meeting someone and having children, getting married, having children was certainly a landmark decision that channeled my life, made my life very rewarding. But as my professional career is another entity that's totally separate from that. As a youth, I got in a lot of trouble. And it got to be pretty serious trouble where I ended up in front of a juvenile judge, and he assigned me to the attention of my junior high principal, who was an old retired football coach that had been through World War II and was our junior high coach, our junior high principal. And I was assigned to him because of the trouble I got into. And he asked me, he said, why don't you go out for football? You're a farm kid. And I said, I did go out for football. I was out there 3 days, and I said, I quit. He said, why did you quit? I said, well, I didn't know what was going on. I put on the football uniform, put on the pads, put on the helmet, and I was out on the field, and all I did was be a dummy for the offensive practicing to knock me down. I said, I kept getting knocked down. I could do that at home with the cows. So I went home. And he laughed. He said, well, the reason you got knocked down is that you don't understand. And he said, if you'll come to my office, you come to my office every day. And he said, I'm going to give you a problem, and you're going to diagram the play each day in my office, diagram a new football play until you understand all the positions and what goes on. And when you have that understanding, Then you can go out for the game and know what's going on around you. And perhaps you'll find that you like the game. That was the most changing point. Otherwise, I probably would not on my own have gone back out for football, even though I was attracted to it. Remember I said I smelled the ball and saw the Friday night. I wanted all that. But then when I went out, I got knocked down. I thought, I don't need this. So I quit. And then I started getting in trouble. And this guy pulled me out and made me, he gave me the benefit of his knowledge. And once he transferred that to me and I understood what was going on, I was a pretty big, pretty tough farm kid. And getting on the field, I could do things if I understood what was going on, but no one had told me about that part of it yet. I hadn't learned the game. So that was probably the most significant spot in my life that turned things around, that headed me towards football.
Awesome. That's a great story on how we talked about Don Shula and your life in the NFL and how he influenced you. And somebody like a middle school principal, ex-football coach can have the same amount of impact and truly shape and kind of put you down that path that led you to Syracuse, to the NFL, to the World Football League.
Jake, it comes down to this. Sometimes people in your life that you least expect, if you would have asked me who's a guy that would probably influence your life when I was 10 years old, starting through, I would have never guessed the junior high principal. But the fact of the matter was, that's because he cared enough to take a second look and spend the time. And if you care enough to respond to that, there's someone somewhere, no matter how bad your circumstance, there's someone somewhere. That's a great thing about our country, is the brotherhood of our country. Someone somewhere is going to recognize every one of us have some God-given talent in some respect, whether it's football, baseball, whether it's, teaching others, whatever it is, we have an asset. We just have to hone it down and find it. And sometimes someone else in our life can find that and realize it and help us along the trail. Then the onus is on you to give back. Mm-hmm. When it's your time, now you got to give back to some others.
Yeah, that's super important. And, if you could sum everything up into the program, I think that's the part we want everybody to take away, is that it's not only important to listen to those mentors because they're looking out for you, but because they've got the talent to do that. But it's important to, once it's your time to do that, to give back as well. And we're going to jump back in a little bit into your football career here. We've talked a lot about your teammates. You've mentioned guys like Paul Warfield, Larry Little, Bob Greasy, your head coach, Don Shula. You went to Syracuse, where guys like Jim Brown and Floyd Little went. The question we like to ask is, we talked a lot about the end of your career and the undefeated season, but what was your welcome to the NFL moment? What was that one moment that stood out to you where you had to step back and go, all right, I'm in the big leagues now. What was that moment for you?
I think when word reached me that I had been drafted in the first round, I, quite frankly, having grown up in Ohio and watched Jim Brown and Paul Brown at the Cleveland Browns, I had always fantasized about being the fullback for the Cleveland Browns. And in 1968, when I was coming out of Syracuse, I had never heard of the Miami Dolphins, and many other people up here in the North had never heard of the Miami Dolphins either. And it was a new franchise expansion team. It was pretty much unknown. And when the attorney called me and said, back then they didn't have a big draft celebration like they do now. It was kind of, a day later a few hours later before I even found out who I had been drafted. And the attorney called me and said, "Congratulations, Larry, you have been drafted in the first round, 8th player overall. Things are going to be good from here out." I said, "Well, am I a Brown?" And he said, "No." And I said, "A Packer?" He said, "No." I said, "Well, what am I?" He said, "You're a Dolphin." And I said, "Isn't a dolphin a fish?" And he said, "Yes." I said, "Well, who would name their team after a fish?" And then he said, "It's the Miami Dolphins." And I said, I quite honestly did not know that Miami that was a new expansion franchise that was like a year and a half old. But lo and behold, just like we talked about before, there's always some things happen through the course of your life, and sometimes they look like it's the terrible thing, but it's actually the best thing in disguise. And that's as you get a little older and you start to realize that you're not so eager to find the negative side of things all the time.
Yeah, I think that's another great story. And, for us, definitely in Northeast Ohio, they probably would have loved to see you in the orange and brown and playing for the Cleveland Browns. But you end up in Miami and you get to do a lot of great things down there with a lot of great people. And with that being said, we're now going to send it out to the museum here at the Pro Football Hall of Fame to Nathan Martin, who's in front of some artifacts dealing with that Miami career. So Nathan, whenever you're ready, go ahead and take it away.
Awesome, Jake. Thank you so much for sending it out here. And just to give you guys a sense of where I'm at right now, I'm on the second floor of our rotunda here at the Pro Football Hall of Fame. And in this portion of the museum, we focus a lot on, the road to equality. We focus on pioneers of the game, record-breaking performances, fantastic finishes. But I'm actually standing in front of the portion of this area of this part of the museum that focuses on perfection. And I know we've talked about it already, Mr. Csonka. We've talked about that 72 season. But if you guys look here, students, we've got another jersey from that season from Larry Csonka. This one doesn't have his nameplate, but 39, that's Larry Csonka. We've got the football that was being carried when the running back trio of Csonka, Mercury Morris, and Jim Kick set the then NFL record for most rushing yards in a season. And then actually behind me down here, we've got some cleats that Larry Csonka was wearing during Super Bowl VII when they capped off that perfect season in 1972. And, you've talked about how important each member of the team was, how every person had to show up and do their job. But I got to ask you personally, what does it mean to you today when you sit back and you watch the NFL and you go, I was a part of the only perfect team in NFL history? There's been teams like the Patriots you mentioned that were so close. There's been teams that were undefeated, but they had a couple of ties. But you're a part of the only team that won every game, 0 losses, and 0 ties. So what does that really mean to you, Mr. Csonka?
I think the high point of that was right at Super Bowl VII when they fired the gun in the fourth quarter. And if you remember, well, you might be too young to remember, but the fourth quarter was very exciting because there was a intercepted pass from Garo Yepremian that put Washington in the position to score and tie the game and perhaps send it into overtime or perhaps even win the game. So it was not a blowout by any stretch. Very few of the games we played in 1972 through the course of that season, the playoffs and the Super Bowl, were games that were one-sided. Perhaps 1 or 2 out of all 17 were one-sided where we had command and control. But many of them were right down to the wire. And what that means is the strain. If you ask about the single most moment, the most appreciated moment, was when we had that lead, and in the fourth quarter of that game, when they fired that gun, and we knew we had attained it, we knew it was ours. That was probably the high point, certainly the high point of my career, certainly a high point of that season. And I think many of the other fellas would agree with me on that 72 team and all the coaching staff and all the supportive personnel, the people that worked in the medical side of it, the people that worked in the pads and field preparation. We were all so happy because we had all been working. It's a common goal, and you put your head down and you go for it. It takes more than just the players. It takes more than just the coaches. It's a whole conglomeration of people. Americans seem to do that best. They get together, and when they decide on something, they set their goals high, and most of the time we achieve it. That single moment when they fired that gun at the end of that at the end of that Super Bowl, that's when I just breathed a sigh of relief. It was all there. Nobody can take it from us ever again. The best they can do is tie us. They can't beat us.
Yeah, so that's so true. That's so true, sir. No one can overcome the record that's been set. Like you said, they can only tie it. And I wasn't around, but I've seen the highlight you're talking about, and I'm sure Dolphins fans, with so many close games, their blood pressure was up every week. But just like you, they can look back and be like, our franchise was the first team to do it, and it's got to mean a lot to you. But thank you for everything you've done for the Hall and for the game of football. I'm going to send it back to Jake to get some more questions there.
Sure thing.
All right, thanks, Nathan. We got time for a few more questions here. I want to make sure we get out to the rest of our schools. So our next question is going to come from Miss, and I apologize if I pronounce your name wrong. I'm not the best, but Miss Alessi's class at the Low Gudice Education Center. Go ahead, and whenever you're ready there, I know I butchered all of that, but whenever you're ready, go ahead and have your student ask their question.
Who's someone that you look up to the most in life?
Who is someone you look up to the most in your life?
Well, I mentioned Mr. Saldus, the principal, that, and I had him stand up when I was inducted at the Hall of Fame. I had him stand up and kind of reiterated the story a little shorter than what I've done here. But my junior high principal, that's someone I looked up to a great deal. I looked up to my father a great deal, and my uncles and my older brother as I was growing up. And then, quite frankly, when I'd be remiss if I didn't tell you the whole truth on this. I looked up to Don Shula, but for the first year that I knew Don Shula, I didn't look up to him at all. I really kind of considered him a little bit crazy. But once I understood his commitment, his integrity, his courage, certainly. Once I recognized that he wasn't a phony. Some people talk about those things, those 5 different things. They talk about them, but they don't live them. When you finally meet somebody that talks about them and is prepared to execute them and live by them, it's not easy to do that. Not all of us have what it takes to do that. It's a mind over matter kind of thing. And a guy like Shula that you can follow and believe in, because he will not take the easy way out. He won't bend the rules. He is rigid. He is right down the middle. It's my way or the highway here. We're all going to go up the mountain together, and we're going to take the mountain, and it's going to be the right mountain. He's that kind of guy. And I would have to say, as far as my professional career, I look to him certainly as a beacon in my light. As a kid growing up in my family and my personal side of my life, I think Mr. Saldus, the junior high principal, and my father those are the 3 people that I would, if there's a heaven, if there's a place wherever they're at, I hope to join them. Maybe we'll get lucky and there'll be a few dogs there too. Who knows?
Awesome. All right. Our last question, then we're going to get to our schools today, is from Miss Hendricks' class right here in North Canton, St. Paul. So whenever you're ready, go ahead and have a student come up to the microphone and ask your question.
What would you say the best advice anyone has ever given to you is?
The best advice anyone's ever given to me? Well, again, I think it would come back to Don Shula. He just laid it on the table and said, he outlined what his commitment was. And what he said to me was, if you're prepared to follow me through this and you're ready to commit to this, then you should stay here and play football with us. If you're not, then we'll trade you and you can go play for someone else. Now, going back to the fellow that I talked about, the junior high principal, Mr. Saldus, he wasn't as clear cut as that. He was a very much a milestone in my life. And he did it subtly. He got me interested in football and steered me. And I didn't realize what an impact he had on my life until years later, when I looked back and realized that he steered me away from some real problems that I was heading into as a juvenile delinquent, and could have ended up much more serious situations. Had he not done that, had he not steered me a little bit right at that point, at that juncture, my life would probably not read the same as it does today. So I'm indebted to him. I didn't realize it at the time, but years later, and thankfully, and this is something I hope you get to do in your lifetime, is you realize that at some point in your lifetime, and you get to thank the person that made a difference in your life. Because trust me, my friend, each of us has someone else in our life that will make a difference, that'll steer us towards the right road. And sometimes we don't realize it till years later. And hopefully we live long enough and they live long enough that we realize it and can go thank them for it.
I think that's a very great point to kind of give credit where credit is due. I got a couple questions here before we wrap up. I want to look at the NFL today. Look at your Miami Dolphins organization that's made some moves, new head coach, new young quarterback. What are your thoughts on the Dolphins this year, and where do you see that franchise going moving forward?
Well, after chewing my nails at several games last year, I'm a Dolphin fan to the bone, and I'm still a Browns fan. If the Dolphins and the Browns play, I kind of, I cheer the first half for the Browns and the second half for the Dolphins. Still a little more than a Dolphin than a Brown, but at the same time, I wish them all the luck. But boy, they've got an uphill fight. There's no two ways about it. They've got some very positive prospects in the young quarterback and some of the other people that they've acquired. I hope that works out. But each year you meet with enthusiasm, and each year for the last 4 or 5, it's been, we kind of got kicked in the shins every time here. So it's about time for them to turn it around and come back on. And I certainly hope it's this upcoming year.
I think all Dolphins fans can say the same. We're going to wrap up here with one last question. And this is the way we like to end, every program. There's been so many great little pieces and little nuggets of information throughout the program today that people can take away. But if you had to sum everything up, and what is that one piece of advice you want students, teachers, fans, anybody watching and involved in the program today to take away, what would that one piece of advice be?
Commitment to excellence. We can all aspire to be the best. Only perhaps a few, if we're lucky, people we know get to reach that goal. But aspiring for it, reaching for it, is what this country's all about. And I think that's what's great about being in America and being free and being able to reach for the goal, reach for the top. Not necessarily money, not necessarily all commitment. It's a combination of the two. It's getting the reward of knowing you're following the right path and you're the one that selected the path. This is a great place to live and a great place to grow up.
Awesome. Well, with that, we're going to wrap up this installment of the Pro Football Hall of Fame's Heart of a Hall of Famer series, powered by our great partners at Extreme Networks. Again, Mr. Csonka, I want to thank you so much for being a part of the program today. And like John said, truly leaving an impact on the game. I like to say the game of football wouldn't be like it is today without the influence of all football players, specifically our Hall of Famers. So thank you for everything you've done for the game of football, and thank you for everything you continue to do for us here at the Hall of Fame.
All right, Jake. Thank you, my friend.
For all of our students and teachers and everybody watching us on YouTube, thank you so much for giving us your time today. And hopefully we'll be able to see you next time here for another installment of the Pro Football Hall of Fame.